Hey guys, how's it going? In today's lecture, we are actually moving into Unit 2. So the first four lectures were Unit 1. Now we're moving into Unit 2, which is one of my favorite units. We're going to get into extinction events. So I'm really excited about that. So in today's lecture, I'm going to focus on the fossil record. This is Lecture 5. This is Unit 2. So again, really excited to move forward into Unit 2. Unit 1, again, was a lot all over the place, a lot of information. It was my attempt to get you up to speed on how to actually talk and get used to some of the scientific terminology that I use throughout the semester. Now we're getting into the nitty-gritty. Now we're getting truly into it. I'm going to kick off Unit 2 by talking about the fossil record. So in today's lecture, I'm going to focus on the formation of fossils, how fossils describe phylogeny and what phylogeny actually is, how they can be used to study Earth's past environments. We're going to focus on the bias in the fossil record. So not all organisms are preserved equally. Some organisms are much more readily preserved than others, depending on their structures, their size, as well as their habitat. And then we're going to finally touch on how fossils depict extinction events. So the fossil record actually allows us to see what life looked like in Earth's past. It's kind of a window to understanding past organisms and their ancient environments. So this organism that you see in front of you, this is an ancient amphibian fish-like organism known as Tiktaalik. And some actually pronounce it Tiktaalik. So this organism has been dated to the late Devonian, which occurred around 400 million years ago. So the late Devonian period. And it has a lot of significance. We'll get into that once we get into the late Devonian extinction event. Now, fossils are formed through a series of different ways. Usually, and many times, they are found, fossils form in more aquatic habitats. So when an organism dies, it leaves behind its hardy tissue. Sediments within the water actually settle on the species, the harder materials like bones and shells, and that material encases those organic materials, and over time that sediment will turn into rock. So that rock hardens over time, and the bones, cellulose, or shells are then transformed into rock minerals. So this is one way fossilization occurs. So it's the immediate replacement of once organic material into rock material. So that is called petrification. So although, if you find many times when you fossilize dinosaur bones, that isn't bone tissue anymore. The bone tissue has been replaced or petrified, and it has been replaced with rock minerals, right? So there's not a bone composition of that material anymore. Sometimes, however, the structures aren't immediately transformed into minerals, and the organic material eventually decays, and that leaves a cavity in the rock formation. So sometimes those structures over time aren't replaced by minerals, and when that happens, those organic materials, because of the long duration of time, will just dissolve, and it'll leave a cast. So here we have a mold fossil, right? This shell, you can tell this is a bivalve. There's no more remnants of shells. This is just the pattern of the shell, and the organic tissues, the organic material, the actual shell has washed away, but it has left an imprint in this rock. So this is a mold fossil. Now for this individual fossil, we have a mold that was later filled in by other minerals, right? And with that, you actually have a cast fossil. So these are not bone, this is not bone material. This is other minerals who have filled in the mold left behind and hardened into subsequent rock material. This is so cool. This is such an amazing preserved fish fossil. Such a cool fossil. Now, some organisms get trapped into tree sap. The sap hardens and becomes buried and becomes fossilized into amber. Now, as I was hiking this past summer, I found a lot of cherry trees that were emitting this sap, and that sap actually had tiny potato bugs, these isopods, trapped inside, and they were already dead. And I was just looking at, a precursor to fossilized amber, which is so cool. So we've learned so much about, these organisms that are trapped in amber. Just absolutely incredible specimens. Now, unlike other fossils, the entire organism is encapsulated over time. So this not only has helped us understand invertebrates like these different insects and eusocial insects like these ants, but a relatively recent find out of Burmese amber actually found a piece of dinosaur tail, the tip of a dinosaur tail. And this dinosaur tail was completely covered in feathers. Now, we should know, as young biologists, that birds are actually an extant lineage of dinosaurs. So not all dinosaurs went extinct. The birds that you see flying today are very closely related to a lineage of dinosaurs that existed before the KT extinction event. However, this individual did not even come from this bird lineage. This individual piece of tail came from an organism that we didn't actually know had feathers. So we've talked about different metabolisms and different kind of thermic responses. Birds, like humans and other mammals, are endothermic. So we create our own heat we maintain our own body's temperature. Now, ectothermic animals, ectotherms, they depend on their environment to heat up their body so they can carry out their metabolism. So after a cold night, you will see ectotherms right as the sun rises. They will find a dark colored rock and they will bask in the sun to get their body temperature up so they can get their metabolism up, right? When an ectotherm is cold, they are very slow and lethargic because their metabolism is down. Endothermic organisms like us, we can wake up and get going because our body has maintained temperature throughout the night. Now, there is a cost to this, and we have to eat much more food than an ectothermic organism. But the reason why I'm talking about this so much is that feathers, like hair, right, they actually keep in warmth, right? Feathers keep in warmth. And what that means is that even though we know that the ancestor of modern day birds were endothermic, and that's why feathers first evolved, is to not for flight, but to keep the organism warm, just like what hair does. This organism that we found, this piece of an organism's tail that we found, suggests that many other dinosaurs of the time were also endothermic. They maintain their own body temperature, and with that being said, we have a totally new understanding of the ecology of these different, jungle and forest-like habitats where dinosaurs lived. Predators, because many predators might have been endothermic, are gonna have to eat, or they had to eat much more than what an ectothermic predator would have to eat, right? So we're still learning about our history, and with fossils, we can learn so much more, right? So much more. So like I keep talking about, fossils, they do help describe life history. We can use the fossil record to paint an amazing evolutionary picture to better understand the phylogeny of these organisms. So these two red terms pop up. Phylogeny is the study of relatedness. How related are organisms, right? And phylogenetics uses genomes to build phylogenetic understandings. So whatever study you're in, if you're studying mammals, you can take the DNA of the mammals you're studying, and the closer related genomes are gonna be branched closer together on a phylogenetic tree, right? So this is a cool phylogenetic tree, and this shows this bird lineage through time. The further back you go, the more of an ancient lineage that is. The further back you go on a phylogenetic tree, the older those common ancestors are. So here we have, throughout the period in which dinosaurs existed, you have all these organisms, right? These are bird-looking organisms. There's no wings yet. Definitely there are feathers. There's a jaw. There's not even beaks with these ancestral lineages, right? As time progresses, you get powered flight, and then you finally get to these modern-day birds that have totally colonized the planet, right? So here's a little phylogenetic tree. Now, in 1861, this amazing fossil showed up in the Burgess Shale, and this Burgess Shale, this layer of rock, has been dated to 150 million years ago, which is the late Jurassic. So this is, you're looking at nearly 80 million years before the KT extinction. You had these birds, these primitive bird organisms, and we call them Archaeopteryx. So Archaea is the prefix for ancient, and Opteryx is birds. So we have these ancient birds that represent a transition in the fossil record. These are transitional fossils. So these aren't true birds, right? If we look closer, this is a skeleton-like skull. I'm sorry, a reptilian-like skull. So there is a jaw, there are several teeth. Compared to modern-day birds, these bones are extremely dense and heavy. These legs are extremely long, and this heavy tail is, again, adds a lot of mass and not a lot of lift. Now, its pectoral region is not as strong as modern-day birds, so And additionally, it has these talons or hooks on the actual wings of its wings. So researchers think that Archaeopteryx actually could not fly. Like, it could not stand on the ground and fly off into the distance. Instead, researchers think that using these claws and their strong legs, they climbed up trees, they gathered in trees, and if predators came by or they saw potential food around, food items, I mean, they looked more like predators with their teeth. So if they found small prey, they could glide from the tops of trees to either evade predators or to find different foods. And they can glide, but they couldn't actually flap their wings and fly. Modern day birds, they have a lightweight beak. They have much reduced legs, and they don't have these hooks on their wings for climbing. All in all, modern day birds actually have much less dense bones. Many bones are hollow. So if you guys have dogs, it's really, really dangerous for your dog to eat chicken wings or even just chicken bones. It's because they chew that bone material, and those bones actually shatter because they're so less dense and they're actually hollow. Shattered bone can actually really mess up your dog's internal digestive system. So yeah, this is a transitional fossil, a precursor to powered flight, but these organisms were much different. They do carry many characteristics, but you can see it's this transition from more lizard-like biology to a more avian-like biology. So this Archaeopteryx, it clarified the origins of modern birds, and it's just amazingly preserved. I mean, there are parts of this planet in which the sediment, usually places in which sediment is super fine, that preserves the most amount of detail. So you can actually see parts of the feathers that were attached to the bone, right? And the tissue. Interestingly enough, there is an exact replica of this amazing fossil in the British Royal Museum in Toronto. So once the borders open up, you guys have to go to Toronto. Toronto is awesome. They have an amazing science museum that has some like world-renowned stuff. So it's so cool that I got to see this with my own two eyes. I mean, an exact replica, not this exact specimen, but nevertheless, it was cool to see this really historic and significant fossil from the Burgess Shale that changed the way we look at modern day birds. Now, these fossils actually help us see how ancient environments functioned. Now you're looking at the most ancient fossils on the planet. These are known as stromatolites. And this is a cross section of a stromatolite here in the bottom right. You can see these subsequent layers. And a stromatolite is actually created from a layer of photosynthetic organism, and they create a calcium carbonate shell or test around them. And this is hundreds and hundreds of years of these layers of cells photosynthesizing. So this is what they look, and there actually are some living stromatolites today, but many of them are just these preserved rock-like structures, and some of them are thousands of years in the making. So these are the oldest fossils on the planet. The oldest stromatolites are 3.5 billion years old. So absolutely ridiculously old fossils. And these organisms actually put the first gaseous oxygen in our atmosphere. So it's so hard to look at the Earth's history and to understand there was a time that there was no oxygen. There was a time where our planet just didn't have gaseous O2, right? That's two oxygen molecules, oxygen in its gaseous phase. Obviously, there was water on this planet, so there was oxygen molecules, but there wasn't O2. There wasn't gaseous oxygen. Oxygen that we breathe, oxygen that our cells require for their own metabolism. Up until 3.5 million years ago, the first photosynthetic organisms, they put the first amounts of oxygen in our atmosphere. Another fossil that changed the way we looked at life is this tiny, unassuming little fossil that is 2 from the Ordovician period. This is 460 million years ago, and this is right when plants actually moved from aquatic habitats onto the land. And without this fossil, there'd be further debate in which and on when plants actually marched up onto land. So this is a mycorrhizal fungus. So this is a red term, mycorrhizae, and mycorrhizae actually associate with plants. So this is a species of fungus, and the fungus actually grows towards a plant root or rhizome, and it actually interacts within the plant tissues, and it exchanges nutrients for sugars. So this is a plant tissue, this is a plant rhizome. The plant is photosynthesizing, and it actually sends sugar to the fungus. And in return, the fungus is looking through soil substrates for nutrients that the plant needs, and it sends those nutrients to the plant in return for its sugar reward. So we actually found a fossilized Glomeromycota, a mycorrhizal fungus that existed during this time. And this is the exact time where plants started to show up on terrestrial habitats. Fungi facilitated plants to exist in terrestrial habitats. We know that, and I want you to know this term, mycorrhiza. Mycorrhiza is the union between a fungus and a plant, and it is a mutualism. Probably should have hit that before I described that. Again, mycorrhiza is the symbiotic union of fungi and plants, in which fungi sends plants nutrients and the plants send fungi sugars from photosynthesis. So I actually did an experiment at Buffalo State. I was awarded, my master's thesis was this experiment. And really quickly, these are 2 of the same exact tree species. These are elm species that I used. And this one had mycorrhizae intact. And this one, I killed the fungus, the mutualistic fungus. So completely different results. By changing the soil microbes, you can totally change the plant phenology. You can totally change what the plant looks like by interacting with the soil microbes. So again, I used a fungicide and I didn't change anything but the fungus in the soil that this plant grew. Look at how tiny this was, right? These were both about 10 weeks old, right? And it's living, but it's not doing great. This one completely flourishing. There is, however, a lot of bias in the fossil record. Now, there's an anatomical bias. For example, jellyfish have been around far longer than trilobites. Now, trilobites are now extinct. Jellyfish are still living to this day, yet I don't think there's a single fossil of a jellyfish, even though there's been billions of times, orders of magnitude more jellyfish than trilobites. You don't find any in the fossil record, right? So we have a much greater chance in finding species with hardy structures, like these trilobites that had this outer calcium carbonate shell, right? So there is an anatomical bias. Soft-bodied organisms like these jellyfish, they decompose before silt settles. So unfortunately, we don't know much about ancestral organisms to jellyfish, right? Because these soft-bodied tissues. So we have an anatomical bias. We should know that. We have a size bias. Larger organisms are made up of hardier and larger, structures. And so they're going to stand the test of time, right? So a T-Rex skull is huge and extremely sturdy, right? So not only are they going to stand the test of time, they're going to be these structures are going to be much more difficult to erode over time. They're also a lot more easily found. So there is a size bias. Larger organisms tend to be found more than smaller organisms. There's a habitat bias. So aquatic organisms that live around water, have a better chance for sediment to settle on them and for fossilization to actually occur. So because of this reason, we have a much better understanding of marine and freshwater organisms than we do about terrestrial organisms. I actually have a nautilus shell like this. So you can see that this shell has been filled in with other materials through time, right? We have other rock materials that have settled within this shell of the organism, the past organism. Next, there is a time bias. Obviously, older fossils are rare to find. There's a better chance of them being destroyed, right? So the older a fossil, the better chance they are being destroyed. Again, the oldest fossil was what? But a stromatolite. So 3.45 billion year old stromatolite. Now I have some examples of fossils here from the Finger Lakes region. I found these rugosa corals. So there are these little staghorn fossils here, and they are 400 million years old about, and I actually have two of them. So these are ancient corals. And ancient corals actually lived in the middle of New York where the Finger Lakes are. So here is 400 million years ago in the center of New York. New York was actually a very shallow ocean. 100 million years after, it was a shallow ocean, and this is rugosa right here. After 100 million years, geologic, tectonic plates and the movement of these continental plates, they changed where the existence of these ancient seas were, and we have we have this sedimentation over time. 65 million years ago, we have the last remnants of the shallow ocean and all this sedimentation. We have fractures caused by glaciation, right? So 19,000 years ago, we have these glaciers moving up and down, receding and moving forward and such, scouring the land, and they revealed these different layers of rock. 10,000 years ago, we have the melting of those glaciers, and that's what gave the Finger Lakes. That's what allows the Finger Lakes to exist, is the scouring and then the melting of that ice into that fresh water. So I actually went to the Finger Lakes. I went to a lake called Skinny Atlas, and you can actually find these layers just stocked full of these fossils. Super cool, awesome way to get back into time. Alongside these staghorn fossils are a brachiopod that were very abundant of the time. And these were rarer to find. So the staghorn fossils were pretty much everywhere. And I found this rock, right? And it had just a different color in the middle. So I just kind of hit it with another rock, and I opened it up, and you could see these like shell-like structures, right? These shell-like structures, especially that one right there. And these are brachiopods. So brachiopods were these shelled organisms. Again, these are animals, and these were living alongside those staghorn corals. So it's really crazy to me, and I got fossil remnants all over my keyboard now, which is not a good thing. But yeah, really cool organisms. The next fossil I have is a nautilus, right? So these nautili, these are oceanic as well. I don't know where this came from, but I do know that it's super cool because it has these crystal rock formations that have infiltrated, right? So this is a cast fossil, right? Super cool. Awesome. My brother-in-law got me this, I think for my birthday a while ago. So love this fossil. Did not find this. Found the first two. And then my friend actually went fossil hunting, and he gave me this fern fossil. Super cool. The really interesting thing about this one is that it's double-sided, right? So these layers of rock, and if you look closely, there's hundreds of layers. These two plants, they lived, which is crazy to me. They literally lived in the exact same position, except the only thing that's different is time, right? So there's hundreds of tiny layers here. These two individuals can be separated by more than 1,000 years, and they're different species. We can look at them, and these are this type of plant that's actually closer related to conifers than they are ferns. So love my fossils. Fossil hunting is super fun, and just getting a better understanding about our natural world and the history of the biology of this planet. So how does the fossil record reveal extinction events? Well, if you look through these layers, right? If you look through layers of rocks, you see organisms between these layers, and then you find an area that has no organisms for thousands and thousands of years. You know that an extinction event occurred right before that void of organisms, right? So, and additionally, extinction events are wide-scale global events. So even if maybe there's like a local extinction, these true extinction events, you see gaps in organisms around the world, right? So you could see when you go around the world, you see these different rock layers. For example, like the KT extinction event, there is this layer that's 65 million years around the world. There's this layer, and there is not a lot of organisms above that layer, and right at that layer there's actually soot. There's this dark layer that was caused by that meteor that just launched megatons of soot into the air, dark soot. That dark soot settled, and you could see that those layers are trapped there, right? So these are the 5 extinction events that we're going to learn about. We have the Ordovician-Silurian extinction event, the late Devonian, the PT extinction event, also known as the Great Dying. We have the Triassic extinction event, and then we have the KT extinction event. That's just how we call this extinction event. This is the extinction of the dinosaurs, right? That allowed the mammal lineage to take over eventually us, right? One more thing I want us to understand about these extinction events, because this is what we're going to be talking about in Unit 2, is that the first extinction event, true extinction event, happened in the Ordovician-Silurian. So not even 500 million years ago. Around 450 million years ago, we had this first extinction event. Now, how old is the planet? The planet is around 4.5 billion years ago, right? So in retrospect of the history of the Earth, 450 million years ago is not that long ago. I mean, it's a long time. Don't get me wrong, but all of the extinction events occur from 450 million years ago to present day. So does that mean that there weren't cataclysmic events that happened prior to the Ordovician-Silurian? No. There were extremely cataclysmic events. Super volcanoes that erupted for a million years, asteroid impacts, right? You name it. There were all these cataclysmic events, but if there's not a lot of organisms living at the time, a lot of organisms aren't going to become extinct. So the term extinction events, it has a lot to do with the life that's around that time. You need life to have extinction events. And this Cambrian period, right? This Cambrian period is the period in which multicellular life evolves. Because multicellular life evolves, you get a drastic, you get this period of punctuated evolution. Multicellular life takes over really fast. You've heard of the Cambrian explosion. It's at this time in Earth's history where evolution really just goes crazy. And you have all these different organisms that come into existence. And with that, when a cataclysmic event happens, now you get these extinction events. So again, this is when you're in the Finger Lakes finding these little regions of fossilized rugosa, this is what you find, which is really cool. So that concludes this lecture. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you're excited for Unit 2 as much as I am. Keep going, keep doing your homework assignments, keep looking on Blackboard, because I am going to have a Unit 1 quiz coming up in the next week or so. Good job, and I will catch you next time.